So the question they asked me is, if a certain candidate, you can guess who's that candidate. So because out of the 4 candidates, only 2 candidates kind of gave an idea on what they mean when it comes to China once they become the president. I mean, a lot of our good friends say that this is the only elections whereby foreign policy could be a major issue in the elections. Fine, but so far all I see are moderate statements. So my standard of an issue is more than moderate statements. And only 2 candidates gave us some sort of a window into how they would approach it. One candidate openly said, they have capital, we need it, joint development is an option. Another candidate said, I'm more leaning towards China rather than the United States. We had had enough of them. The other 2 candidates are pure moderate statements. We will defend our rights in the West Philippines. So with what we got, all we can look at are the structural political opportunity for recalibration if the next president comes to picture. Now this gives you an idea of how difficult it would be for the next Filipino president to make a major recalibration in its foreign policy. China's favorability rate, I'm not sure if you can use the term favorability anymore when it's at negative 45, is at its lowest since it was ever recorded by SWS. So first, SWS started it in 1994 when China took away duty-free from us. But actually took us months before we discovered that we lost something, which says a lot about our domain awareness deficit. And this is one of my frustrations. Everyone in the Philippines talks about minimum deterrence, meaning spend billions of dollars buying submarines, aircrafts and all, but actually at the front line of our fight for our national interest should be the Coast Guard, the law enforcement. And you don't need to spend billions, you only need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. Anyways, this gives you an idea of where China stands. And actually, there is some sort of inverse relationship between China's favorability and Japanese and American favorability. According to the Pew Research Survey, Americans' favorability last year was at 91%. 91% of Filipinos have a positive favorability perception towards the United States, which is, I think, 5 points higher than Americans' favorability rates of their own country. Of course, we broke that record back in 2013 when we were at 89% and Americans were at 86%. So we're bigger fans of Americans than Americans themselves of themselves. Which is a huge record, so I understand why Pia Wurtzbach chose to answer the first question in the way she did. Very smart one. She stood with the popular opinion. And she has political plans, and Japan, interestingly, their favorability rating in the last survey was at 80%. Highest ever recorded. So those 2 countries, which in many ways are seen as our best bets against China, because they're helping us in terms of developing our capability among others, are actually increasing their favorability just when China's favorability ratings or unfavorability ratings are historic low. Next. Okay, just to give you an idea how bad things are. Okay, so this is a graph of reclamation activities in the last, 20 years. Okay. This is it. China is not the only country that is messing around, right? Apparently everyone except us is messing around. Now, the metaphor I always use is that imagine yourself driving in a country whereby no one follows the traffic light. And if you're the only one who follows the traffic light, most likely you're going to have an accident. Right? Because you go with the norm when the law doesn't work. Right? Norm is the best supplement for law. Right? Now this gives you an idea that we are the only country that has not been following the norm. And the norm is scramble on the ground. Right? Show next. Previously. Okay, this gives you an idea of the military aspects of the dispute. So the Chinese, over just 2 years, they have built the biggest airstrip ever, 3 kilometers long, that can accommodate all kinds of advanced aircrafts. The Philippines, we were the first one in 1973, but if you look at it, now we have among the smallest, but the size is not an issue. That's what she said, but no, the size is not an issue. The issue here is, I'm sorry for that, that was complete lack of sleep. This is an issue of quality. I mean, if you look at our airstrip, my goodness, it's really a sight to watch at and weep, right? So in most of my presentation, I don't show any more pictures of the Philippines facilities, right? I only show the pictures of facilities of other countries. The Taiwanese in the last year spent $100 million to upgrade already a beautiful airstrip in Ituaba. The Vietnamese have been doing reclamation in the last 2 years, but because of the Typhoon 1 was completely gone. The Malaysians upgraded their airstrip, beautiful airstrip and spa resort in Swallow Reef in 2004. We're the only country who's not done anything with respect to that. And it's because our president says that we have to have the moral high ground. But they could not point out to me a single provision in UNCLOS that says that maintaining existing facilities is illegal. So apparently they want to run in a beauty pageant. They don't know anything about foreign policy, and I hope the next president will change that. Next, very quickly. Okay, now this gives you an idea of the Game of Thrones that is happening now in Spratly. This is just a Spratly. You go to the north in Paracels, it's completely Chinese controlled. They just deployed the surface-to-air missiles to that area. Things are scary. The other group of islands is Pratas, completely controlled by Taiwan, but China has no problem with it because Taiwan is an extension of China in their mind. So the Chinese are now getting the third major chain of islands, and this is Spratly. Now if you notice, actually Vietnam in triangle has controls the most features. But most of those features are rocks, atolls, and low tide elevations. The best features are controlled by Taiwanese and us. But the Chinese, thanks to artificial reclamation, they have created now the biggest islands in the area. So the Fire Cross now is 11 times bigger than the biggest land feature, which was Itoa. And they're going to build at least 3 different airstrips in that area, Fire Cross, Subi Reef, and Mischief Reef. And this is a very scary situation. And this is just a picture of bases. If I put a satellite imagery, for instance, of Coast Guard vessels, fishermen, military exercise, this is a congested place. It's worse than our traffic in the Philippines. It's more like the traffic you see in New Delhi, if you watch TV, etc. What am I trying to say here? When you have a dangerous situation like that, you need communication channels with your enemy. Our good friend Niccolo Machiavelli always said, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. I'm not saying China is an enemy, but they're definitely not our friend, right? And the fact that we have the only government that doesn't have any high-level bilateral engagement with President Xi Jinping and hasn't even bothered to negotiate a single hotline or confidence-building measure, I think is what Talleyrand, the foreign minister of Napoleon, said, is worse than a crime. It's a mistake, right? Because Vietnam and Japan also have very toxic relationship with China over territorial disputes, have multiple hotlines and confidence-building measures. To heck with it, even the US has 2 different hotlines with the Chinese to deal with this issue. So what I'm trying to say is that these are the deficits. Maintenance of our facilities, confidence-building measures and hotlines, engagement on the highest level that I think any of our top 4 candidates should pursue. And indications so far are that all of the top 4 candidates, including Mauro Vaz, who's the anointed successor, are going to be more careful in how they approach China. If we look at the language of Mauro Vaz, he's very, very much more calibrated in his language. Binay and Duterte have even a more accommodating language, while Po, I'm still waiting for her to more clarify her position on that. But I doubt her position is that different from Mauro Vaz. Now, nonetheless, some people suspect that if one of the more friendly pro-China guys supposedly wins, will that person be in a position to dramatically change their bilateral relations with China? There are at least 3 reasons that I believe it will be very difficult for the next Filipino president to make a 180 degrees change in our foreign policy. First of all, now that the EDCA is implemented, and now that the Japanese have signed for the very first time with a non-NATO member a defense equipment transfer agreement, those 2 countries will mobilize all their diplomatic capital, if not more, to make sure that the next Filipino president will not dramatically change their position. The other thing is this. I remember when I was an undergraduate in UP, in the 2000s, mid-2000s, our hero was China during the time, not US. US was Bush, right? And there was a survey in 2006 in Australia that showed that China is more popular in Australia than Bush. So when Bush visited Australia, they had to shut down half of the town so that people don't throw shoes there. But when Hu Jintao visited there, all you could see were Chinese flags all over the place. We had a very positive image of China during the time, not this kind of favorable ratings. Now China is the #1 villain. To a point that you have certain national artists openly accusing China of, trying to invade us, which I don't think makes any sense. But unfortunately, you also have a climate of paranoia. Now, the next thing that we have to keep into consideration is national consciousness and awareness. I'll be honest, I thought I was a very smart guy when I was in my undergraduate. I thought I know everything. Don't worry about it. But actually, I just realized I had no idea about the disputes in the South China Sea when I really started to research about this. Today, when I write taxi drivers, when I'm coding, they lecture me on UNCLOS and 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone. That is the level of awareness we have today. And there are people like me today whose bread and butter is to find out something fishy in the South China Sea. What I'm trying to say is that if we elect a president who's known to have no integrity, who's known to be pro-China, I don't think it's the Nixon who can make a deal with the Mao. President Nixon could make a major deal with China because he was known as a rabid anti-communist beginning in the 1940s, right? So when he made a deal with Mao, no one accused him of treason. If the candidate who's known as pro-China wins the next elections, you can imagine the reaction in the media, among civil society groups, and among our top allies the moment he does that. That is why I frankly told some of our Chinese counterparts, that's the worst nightmare for you. You rather have a president who has integrity to win, because that person can make a deal with you guys. But the ultimate question is, Nixon is something, the bigger question is Mao. We need to have a Mao in China. And today, if you look at China, it's a country in a very difficult economic transition. China's economic growth is still impressive, but in an autocratic regime, when people cannot punish their politicians in moment of economic slowdown, you can face more and more political backlash. And this is the problem of China. Their slowdown is undermining political capital of Xi Jinping, just when he needs to consolidate power to make tough decisions, including in the South China Sea. So we need an Nixon for the next election. I'm not going to endorse anyone, but you know who I'm not endorsing at least, among the 4 candidates. But definitely, let's hope that China will also get its house in order. In short, don't have Schadenfreude when China's economy is not doing well, because autocratic regimes tend to actually overcompensate and be more aggressive abroad when they're weak at home. So I'll keep it there. I look forward to question and answer. Sorry for taking too much of your time.